Escalating attacks on key oil and gas facilities are fueling a new phase of the conflict in the Middle East. Responding to President Trump's latest threats, Iran now has vowed to attack all U.S. water and energy facilities in the region. And Iran's parliamentary speaker says that Tehran would irreversibly destroy essential infrastructure across the Middle East, which includes vital water systems, energy, information technology, and desalination plants belonging to the U.S. and Israel. The Iranian regime has already hit several energy facilities in the Gulf, including Qatar's Ras Laffan LNG facility, Saudi Arabia's Samref refinery, the Jubail petrochemical complex, as well as the UAE's Al Hosn gas field. And the strikes are mainly in response to Israeli strikes on its largest gas field at South Pars last week, which Tehran says has now ignited a, quote, full-scale economic war. And both sides of the conflict view energy as a potent target. The question is, why? Iran needs oil and natural gas to keep the lights on and its government running. It holds about a tenth of known oil reserves on Earth and the world's second largest gas reserves. And attacks on Middle Eastern energy infrastructure could also be catastrophic for Gulf nations, which depend on electricity to make their desert cities habitable. They consume 5 times as much power per capita as Iran, mostly to run desalination plants that supply almost all water supply to the likes of Bahrain and Qatar. And Gulf states are also heavily reliant on energy exports for revenue. Estimates by Capital Economics suggest the region's 2026 GDP could fall between 10% to 15% if there is lasting damage to energy infrastructure. Analysts say that such a hit, coupled with skyrocketing oil prices, could put a strain on ties with the U.S. and support for its war against Iran.
Well, targeting the Gulf's energy facilities would have a knock-on effect on other essential facilities, and one of them being desalination plants, which require power to produce and supply water to rapidly growing cities such as across Saudi Arabia, Oman, the UAE, Kuwait, Bahrain and Qatar. More than 400 of desalination plants are located along the Persian Gulf coast. About 100 million people in the region depend on these plants to turn seawater into drinking water and water for agriculture and industrial purposes. Why does desalinated water really matter so much? You know, the 6 Gulf states, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia and the UAE are deserts, and they are most water-scarce countries in the world. Limited rainfall, the absence of permanent rivers, and the depletion of groundwater reserves mean that these desalination plants are crucial for water security in the Gulf. Damaging or destroying any of these facilities turns the military confrontation into a full-blown humanitarian emergency. According to data from 2023, the region produced 7.2 billion cubic meters of fresh water through desalination. And desalination plants produce close to 100% of the drinking water consumed in Bahrain, Qatar and Kuwait. The UAE meets 42% of their water needs through such facilities. And in Oman, that figure stands at around 86%. And for Saudi Arabia, which is the world's largest producer of desalinated water, 70% of its supplies come from desalination. Without these plants, major cities in the Gulf would not be able to sustain their populations. And analysts say the consequence of disruption would be almost immediate, given that all these nations have limited water storage capacity. If a major plant is out of action, governments would be forced to ration water supplies. In turn, we'll likely see an exodus of people from major cities as hospitals, sanitation systems, food production and industries could all be affected. And the tit-for-tat threats between the U.S. and Iran to widen their targets in the war are marking an escalation in the 3-week-old conflict. Earlier, CNA spoke to Malcolm Davis, senior analyst for defense strategy and national security at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. He says we're at a critical point in the conflict where both sides could ramp up the intensity of their attacks.
Their goal is to generate economic chaos around the world to increase pressure indirectly on the Trump administration to back down. If they try and take the Americans on sort of head-to-head with military forces, they'll lose because they simply don't have the military forces to win in any battle. So this is their strategy, is to cut off energy flows, to cut off oil exports, to create that economic chaos around the world and increase it over coming weeks. So in the end, the Americans back down.
And by widening its potential target set across the Gulf, the fear really is, Malcolm, that Iran could raise the risk of miscalculation. And if so, what kind of strike would force a much wider regional response?
Well, look, I think that what we're facing is the prospect that the Trump administration has already given a 48-hour deadline, which I think runs out in about 24 hours, in terms of opening up the Strait of Hormuz. If the Iranians don't do that, then President Trump has threatened to attack the energy infrastructure across Iran. Iran has basically said that if Trump does that, then they'll retaliate with attacks on not only energy infrastructure, but also desalination plants. I think that would definitely bump up escalation risk, because then I think the Trump administration would dramatically increase its strikes on Iran. I think that the possibility that Iran could attack shipping, blocking the straits, attacking oil and natural gas fields in the Gulf states could also increase escalation. So there's a number of pathways going forward that could see greater escalation in the coming weeks.
And from what you're saying, would you say then that the next 24 hours, when that deadline passes, could possibly be a hinge moment in this conflict?
Absolutely. If the Iranians don't back down, if they don't open the Strait of Hormuz, then I think it's likely that President Trump will carry through with his threat to attack energy infrastructure and essentially turn off the lights across Iran. If the Iranians then retaliate with their threatened attacks on desalination plants, that's going to create a massive humanitarian crisis, because you've then got tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people across the Middle East without access to drinking water. This war will continue for several weeks, if not longer. And so the risk is that we reach higher and higher levels of conflict. The Iranians continue to close the Strait of Hormuz, and the economic damage to the global economy and to energy security continues to mount. So I don't see this war ending anytime soon. And certainly I think we're at a critical point now where it could rapidly ramp up in intensity.